Yes, and he's a St. Paul's boy, where George Osborne studied.
Yes.
My great worry about Euclid, on behalf of Euclid, is that the IMF and Dr. Schäuble and the ESM are engaged in a game that is absolutely the opposite of straightforward. On the one hand, we're being told that the ESM will only provide this much discussed loan of more than 80 billion if the IMF is on board. The IMF is coming out with debt sustainability analysis, which quite clearly stated for the record that the Greek debt is not sustainable, and according to its own rules, the IMF cannot participate in any new bailout. I mean, they've already violated their rules twice to do so, but I don't think they will do it a third time. I think they are kicking and screaming that they are not going to do it a third time. So there is a very serious danger here that the Greek Parliament, not in my name, but in the name of the majority who voted last night, will approve the very stringent measures, reforms they call them, but they are nothing but just cost-cutting exercises without much reforming going on. But anyway, that we will push through Parliament these prior actions, as they're being called. But then, at the end of the day, the ESM and the IMF will not be able to coordinate so as to provide that huge loan. Not that I want that huge loan to be provided, for the reasons that you, David, you, Norman, outlined before, but I think that there is a major tussle between the institutions, the ESM, the European Commission, the IMF, and Dr. Schäuble. Dr. Schäuble and the IMF have a common interest. They don't want this deal to go ahead. Wolfgang has quite clearly said to me he wants Grexit. He thinks that this extend and pretend is unacceptable. And this is the one point where we see eye to eye. I agree with him too, for completely different reasons, of course. The IMF does not want an agreement because it does not want to have to violate its charter again and to provide new loans to a country whose debt is not viable. The Commission really wants this deal to go ahead. Merkel wants this deal to go ahead. So what has been happening over the last 5 months is now projected into the very short term, only it is on steroids. And that is this complete lack of coordination between the creditors.
That has been very striking, I have to say, Yanis. What about France? You are on record as having said that you think this is all about France and that Mr. Schäuble is using you as a kind of pawn, basically, in a much bigger chess game with France. Now, I know Greece is certainly not in a very healthy position, but can you tell us a little bit about where you think France plays out in all of this?
The French are terrified. They're terrified because they know that if they're going to shrink their budget deficit to the levels that Berlin demands, the Parisian government will certainly fall. There is no way that they can politically handle the kind of austerity which is demanded of them by Berlin. And when I say by Berlin, I mean by Berlin. I don't mean Brussels, I mean Berlin. So they are trying to buy time. This is what they've been doing now, as you know, for a couple of years. They've been trying to buy time in terms of an extension of the time period during which they will have to reduce their deficit to below 3.5%, 3%, the Maastricht criteria, the Stability and Growth Pact. At the very same time, Wolfgang Schäuble has a plan. I wrote an article today in Die Zeit, in the German newspaper. It's quite extensive and I think quite controversial, in which I explain what Dr. Schäuble's plan is. And this is one of the very sweet moments in one's life when one does not have to theorize, because all I did was to convey the plan as Dr. Schäuble described it to me. And the way he described it to me is very simple. He believes that the Eurozone is not sustainable as it is. He believes that there has to be some fiscal transfers, some degree of political union. He believes that for that political union to work without federation, without the legitimacy that a properly elected federal parliament can bestow upon an executive. It will have to be done in a very disciplinarian way. And he said explicitly to me that a Greek exit is going to equip him with sufficient bargaining power, with sufficient terrorizing power in order to impose upon the French that which Paris is resisting. And what is that? A degree of a transfer of budget-making powers from Paris to Brussels.
Well, this is really fascinating stuff. As Norman said, we are slightly running out of time, but we've been allowed by the controllers of Radio OMFIF to go on for another 5 minutes. So, Norman, shall we have two last questions, one from you and one from me? Norman.
Well, I just wondered, are you in any way, I'm not sort of suggesting you should be, but I'm just interested in your view about the role of the ECB in this. I read there's a lot of criticism in Greece of the ECB and a feeling that the ECB had acted in a political way, whereas my own instinct would be that Mario Draghi would lean over backwards not to be political, although at times he would have to make decisions that obviously would have political effects.
I think that both perspectives are completely spot on. You're right. Mario Draghi has handled himself as well as he could. And he tried to stay out of this mire, the political mire, impressively. I've always held him in high regard. I hold him in even higher regard now, having experienced him over the last 6 months. Having said that, the European Central Bank is set up in such a way that it is so highly it is impossible not to be political. Don't forget that the ECB, the Central Bank of Greece, because that's what the ECB is the Central Bank of all of our member states. The Central Bank of Greece is a creditor of the Greek state. And therefore, it is also, it is the lender of last resort, supposedly, and the enforcer of fiscal austerity. Now, that violates immediately the supposed distinction between fiscal and monetary policy. It puts Draghi in a position where, in acting as a creditor when we came into power, he had to discipline us. He had to actually asphyxiate sufficiently in order to yield to the demands of the creditors, while at the same time keeping our banks open. So, God could not do this in a non-political way.
Yes.
He's going to be turning on the taps, I think. Now, there's some talk that somehow you will be benefiting from quantitative easing once the loans are repaid on Monday. That's one question to you, Yanis, just in the final couple of minutes. The second question I've got for you is, what kind of a role are you going to be playing? Are you going to be in any political position now? Is Alexis Tsipras still talking to you? Do you still have some interlocuteur with the government? And also, what do you think of the future of Mr. Tsipras? Is he going to stay around for a lot? So sorry to load you up with a fairly large number of questions for your final couple of minutes.
Well, on the first question, what the ECB is doing, it is increasing ELA by 900 million in order to give a little bit more liquidity through the ATMs that were very severely circumscribed up until now. The question of quantitative easing is, I think, crucial. If Greece does not get onto the bandwagon of quantitative easing over the next few months, then that's it. There's absolutely no way that Greece can stay in the Eurozone. But for this to be meaningful, they have to have, firstly, they need to restructure